You're listening to the Colts Blue Zone Podcast with Mike Chappell and Dave Griffiths.
Inside the Fox 59 CBS 4 podcast studio, welcome to the Colts Blue Zone Podcast. Alongside Matt Adams and Mike Chappell, I'm Dave Griffiths. Certainly appreciate you joining us for the week of the NFL Draft. Let's go, everybody. We made it here. Every team building the
Christmas
roster.
Eve.
It is for the future because it is tomorrow as we tape this podcast on Wednesday. So, lot to look forward to. So much has been pointing to this week across the NFL. And the Colts are back in action, in fact, at team headquarters right now. We here in the Colts Blue Zone podcast studio, if you're watching us either on YouTube or the Fox 59 Now app, you can see the splendid room that we have here behind Matt.
We're getting there.
Behind Mike. Not as much behind me.
So there's a pecking order. There's a depth chart, and we see one, and we see two,
and we see three. Three is very, very obvious.
We see the undrafted rookie.
Yes, whenever we exactly.
And Dave's the host of the podcast,
I know.
which doesn't make any sense.
No, but
essentially, just for you're wondering, and I know that you've been very curious.
Very.
Most of our other shows that we've been doing have been two-person shows. So when they added these things, most of them like to have someone sitting across from them.
Right.
So those were the two first backgrounds that went in.
Well. Our show has been the benchmark for Fox 59 now. Like we were the first one. We were the first out of the gates.
Yep.
And yet this is the respect that we get from everyone.
See where
here.
we are in the pecking order.
Exactly.
So
Anyway, we got to find out who Chris Ballard's pecking order is right now. That's the goal that everyone has had for the past couple weeks, past couple months, as the NFL draft is coming. I promise my All-RAS draft is coming a little bit later in the show, but we are going to begin with listening to Chris Ballard from not us listening right now, but just reacting to what Chris Ballard had to say is what I mean. As he does every year, Chris took to the microphone to speak with the local indie media as draft week is here. Nothing out of the ordinary, I don't think. Nothing dramatic from the Colts general manager. But Chap, you were there. You were asking questions. Did you have any big takeaways from what Chris had to say to you just earlier this week as the draft is on the horizon?
No, just that this was like the first year that he didn't give us a real number on first round.
I noticed that. Like every year in the past, it's
whether
always
it's
like
17 or 26 or whatever.
He was very cagey.
I just wonder if that's because he didn't want to say there's 12, or something like that.
Right.
And because every draft analyst has mentioned how this is not a draft that's top heavy with talent. Which is probably why a lot of people aren't wanting to move up. People want to move back. Mm-hmm. Whatever you get at 10, not 10, but at 15 you can get at 25. But then too, we're focused on the tight end group because you have to be. And he mentioned again, if there's a guy, that we think's a difference maker and we have a chance to get him, we'll take him. And then Shane Steichen said the same thing on Tuesday. We're looking to get a pass catching tight end, possibly. If we can. So the fact, and I'm going to post something a little bit later today on that, is again, I'm guilty more than anyone of getting locked into what they need. But this is a year, as we've talked, this is a year where need coincides with best player. Most draft analysts have Tyler Warren and Colston Loveland in their at worst, top 15. Daniel Jeremiah, who I was on his Zoom call earlier, he's got him like 6 and 7. So, is that a reflection of the weakness of the draft? Probably.
Might be.
The top quarterback, Cam Ward, ranked like 10, 12, 15.
Mm-hmm.
So, but just the fact that they're either being very, very transparent on we're going to get a tight end, or they're doing a world-class poker bluff. Mm-hmm. And I don't believe that's the case because this just lines up to take care of your need first.
I think what Chris Ballard said specifically in reaction to that about need and value in the draft and coinciding there, he said, "I think we all know what we need." That's how he opened his reaction. So yes, like it's very obvious that there's a big hole right there.
And he also said the one thing you can't do is chase.
Yes,
because when you chase, and again, it came to me back in the day with Bill Tobin when he was with the Bears, and they had a crying need at left tackle, mm-hmm. and they didn't have one on their board in round 1, so they reached into the third round for, I believe his name was Stan Thomas, a third-round prospect. They took it in the first round, and it didn't work. Duh. So, but this is a case where you're not chasing. You're not you're not having to. Let's if we push this guy a little bit more, we'll feel better. No, it's a case of one of these two guys, and I've double and triple checked my research, but the last time two tight ends went in the top 14 was 1973. So one of these guys should be here. I would argue, as we've talked, if they're in love with Tyler Warren, move up to get him.
Go that way.
Now, the question is, if you really want to make sure you get him, you have to move ahead of the Jets, who are at, what are they?
7.
Yeah. So move to 6. If 6 wants to move, again, dropping back to 14, whether or not the Raiders want to move back to 14, if they want a quarterback, if they want a running back. But again, if this is a guy you want, go get him. And if Tyler Warren is gone to the Jets,
some drafts have him go to Jacksonville as well.
5,
right,
yeah.
which would be a bad thing.
Right.
Then move up 3, 4, 5 spots to get Loveland, because you don't want to be sitting there at 14. And your pre-draft is we need to get one of these guys and have them both gone.
And that's the difference. I want to point this out. The difference between chasing a prospect and going to get a prospect. Like there is a slight difference there. Mm-hmm. Like if you're actually actively like trying to move up to get someone you have as a first round talent. Yeah, exactly. Or second round talent.
They moved
like
up
Taylor.
3 or 4 spots because they didn't want to wait for him.
Right. It's not like you're chasing. Oh, we need running back so bad. We got to go get someone.
Right.
Like it doesn't matter where he is on the board. It's this guy is high on our board. He is the last person in this tier on our board. We really like this guy. We should go get him.
And one of the examples that Chris Ballard mentioned is, and it was just theoretical or hypothetical, but he said, what if if you've got like 2 centers that you think are top, whatever, first round, second round, and then it drops to the next guy's a 6th round pick, and you need a center, then maybe you do reach at that spot for one of those 2 guys. But I think this is the case that they won't need to reach, and if both of them are gone, then maybe I don't know what you do. You can go into that. Maybe they go for the linebacker or an offensive lineman, and then visit tight end in round 2, as you with your RAS probably will do.
Mm-hmm. As I do. Chris Moore on the tight end saying, we'll let the board play out the way the board should play out. Of course, I like in the first round, you can already see like how we have it stacked versus how the outside world has it stacked. I promise you, it is not the same. It's not. Dun, dun, dun.
He said if you polled every team's top, was it 85 players or 100 players? He said that you might be right on 85% of them agreeing.
Right.
Because it depends. Maybe the Colts prefer Colston Loveland instead of Tyler Warren. You just don't know.
Right. Because there are size considerations for certain positions that may not fit their prototype of what they want. There are scheme considerations that go into play too.
They want a 3-down guy. They've told us they want a 3-down guy, which might be more of Warren. Maybe he's more of a blocker.
It sounds like Warren from the draft evaluations, but it's not a role that Loveland can't do.
Right.
And he was an inline blocker because Michigan ran a run-heavy offense.
And look, and here's the value for the Colts in that specific need or that specific explanation from Chris Ballard. Like the Colts are not the Chiefs or the Bengals. I think the Bengals would be a great example. They're not the Bengals. They're not an aired-out offense. Like they want to be a run-oriented offense. So if you want your best players, your most game-changing players on the field at all times, like a tight end, he needs to be able to block because you're going to run more than the Bengals are running.
You put Mo out there, and you think, well, they're going to run the ball.
Exactly. Right. So that's why the Colts specifically want a 3-down type tight end.
Yeah.
In this, and not as much like Dallas Clark was an awesome tight end here, obviously, for a long, long time. But the Colts offense then was very different than the Colts offense now. As good as a running back like Joseph Adai was, I don't think, was he here during the last Edgerrin James years as well?
No,
I thought he was after. I thought he was just after that. So
he was a rookie in 06.
Right. But that was a team that was aired out. That was Peyton Manning drove the bus, obviously. So
Reggie, Marvin,
Dallas
Stokely.
Clark was a perfect fit in that offense. He would not be a type of guy that they would be looking for in this draft if you listen to Chris Ballard, which makes sense from what Chris Ballard is saying.
The times that they had Dallas Clark trying to block a defensive end was malpractice.
Right. Exactly.
You got what you deserved. He got beat.
Yes.
More times than not.
And so that's why they are looking for that specific type of player. So if you look at, there's a kid from Bowling Green who's tested really well. Fannin.
Okay, Fannin.
Yeah, Fannin at tight end. Like, I don't think the Colts would be that interested in him. Watch, they draft him on Friday night, and I'm eating my words. But he's not in the line of players, like in the description of players that they need for a run-oriented offense, where if you put him on the field, the defense does not know what is happening.
Right.
So that is why Chris Ballard is explaining it that way, that he's looking for a 3-down tight end, because he's a guy that's the type of player in this offense that they really need.
Because they keep saying, and Chris Ballard mentioned again on Monday, we like our room. But the problem is, like, it was the same issue they had last year. All of them do certain things okay,
right,
and other things not okay.
Yeah.
And that's where you've got that subset of talents that just doesn't work towards a 3-down player.
Yeah, this is what Chris Ballard said. We have 2 really good blockers. We have a young kid we think has some speed and some upside. But saying that, ... we have a chance we can make a difference, blah, blah, blah. So,
and then he went to Jack Doyle.
Right.
Which it's crazy. Not crazy. It's really amazing how they always default to Jack Doyle.
Yes, I love this picture of Jack. If you're watching it here on
Saint Jack Doyle,
it's amazing how I always appreciated what Jack did and what he was.
Yep.
I'm not sure that a lot of people, certainly outside the franchise, understood his value as a locker room guy, as a community guy. But what he did in the field, go back and watch Jonathan Taylor's 1,800-yard season and look at some of those blocks, those springing blocks that Doyle did.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just really amazing what he can do and what he did. So, but you want more. You want more than Jack Doyle.
Mm-hmm.
You want more than 7.9 yards.
Yep.
I'm going to make a ridiculous comparison.
Please do. We love the ridiculous.
All right. So the Colts have not really solved their quarterback quandary since Andrew Luck retired in August of 2019.
Mm-hmm.
They have not, and it's on a different level. I understand that, but they have not solved their tight end room since Jack Doyle retired a couple years ago.
Yeah, they haven't solved the number 1 corner since Vontae Davis left either, or the number 1 pass rusher since Robert Mathis left.
Maybe they did with Ward. We don't know. At least they took steps to do the corner.
Well, yeah, I mean, we don't know.
Agree,
yeah.
And that's where I beating a dead horse is how when you're chasing mistakes with edge rushers, we don't know about Latu. You think he's going to be pretty good player.
There was a lot of alts. There were so many almosts last year. Can he make those almosts?
But they've invested 3 or 4. I think it's 3 draft picks in tight ends. Not premium draft picks.
Yeah,
but those haven't panned out. Nope. One of them's now. Grayson went to Philly.
Yep.
You haven't in corner. They've drafted some corners. They used a 2nd-round pick on Brents a couple of years ago. That's not panned out.
It's not panned out either.
If Juju Brents had been the guy they wanted, they're probably not signing Ward.
Right.
You're very true. Very true.
So when you have to replace that, you're in trouble. But they've got some options, but I keep defaulting to tight end because I miss Jack Doyle.
It's obvious. It's just, like Chris said, we all know what we need. I come back to that.
All I need are 3 numbers. It's all I need. 39, 467, and 2. Normally, I need to double and triple check my numbers because
those are just burned.
It's like 27-7 to bring up.
27-7, my guy.
When those are your numbers, in the last tight end to have at least 40 catches and 400 yards was Jack Doyle.
Mm-hmm.
So it's again, this is one where I keep saying, don't overthink it. Don't make this complicated. If one of those guys is there, you run up and hand in the card, and then you say, what are we going to do in round 2?
Exactly. You give them a call, you celebrate, you cheers, and then you go out and speak to the media, hopefully right away.
Right.
So we can talk. We don't have to stay there until midnight.
That's not going to happen. I'll be at 1 o'clock.
I know.
You're right.
But then go think about round 2 a little bit later. Chris, one point that he made, which I'll echo, and we have brought it up in the past, is that the best tight ends in this league, Travis Kelce was a 3rd-round pick. Mark Andrews was a 3rd-round pick. George Kittle was a 5th-round pick. Brock Bowers is a 1st-round pick last year. Is more the exception to the rule about the best. And that's not the case in every position. Like the best left tackles in the NFL, they're mostly 1st-round picks.
I bet it's 70%.
I mean, you have outliers like Jordan Mailata from the Eagles, who was like 7th round or undrafted guy because he was a rugby star from Australia, and they made him into a left tackle, which was crazy. But the vast majority, first round picks there. Tight ends, that is not the case.
Well,
really, it's the opposite.
Look at the last 2 established left tackles the Colts have had. Tariq Glenn and Anthony Costanzo, first round picks.
Number 1. That's right.
And you hope that, Bernie is going to emerge to that. And he was a 3.
He was a 3, yes. So a little bit of an
inexperienced 3.
Very.
So, and you can't, tight end is a position that you can find guys. Although, again, Kyle Pitts was a 4, I think.
He was like, for the Kyle Pitts for the Falcons. He was a first round pick.
Right.
I
mean, 4th overall.
Okay. I thought you were 4th round. I was like, wait a minute.
Yeah. But Anthony Gonzalez or Tony Gonzalez was like 13th.
Yep.
The Kellen Winslows were top 15. So, it's how the Colts have these guys stacked. And we're talking with some guys with the Colts, and I always contended if it was Brock Bowers and Latu last year, you take Latu because he's an edge rusher. And they said, no, they'd have taken
Bowers.
They'd taken Bowers. Although that's not the premium position, but it's about what you need. And as we always said, it only takes 1 or 2 teams to need something or need a player, whether it's draft or free agency. And this is going to be really cool. I want to see the anxiety level when one of these tight ends goes off the board at 6, 7, 8, whatever.
Then what happens?
And then do you say, hey, trust the board?
And here's the deal. And you touched on this earlier. With no one moving yet in this draft, like it gives you the idea that if certain teams have, let's say, 12 to 15 first round grades, and that's what Chris Ballard didn't want to say.
Right.
But if like 10 of them are gone in the top 10, then I think some teams picking from 16 back to 32 get a little bit more desperate to be like, we don't have a lot of guys here. We can try to move up a little bit here. So I think the second half of this first round, we're starting right about where the Colts are, could get very interesting, which also, like, I hate to say this, Colts fans, but if it could be Chris Ballard moving back if what he sees is not working out in his idea.
How it plays out, right?
Exactly, how the top of the draft moves
the one move
forward.
they could do to just throw everybody into panic mode is if a certain player slips who has been projected to slip and is there at 14.
A certain player.
A certain player whose dad is a Hall of Famer and perhaps one of the greatest cornerbacks to ever play.
Wink, wink, nudge, nudge.
Can you imagine them taking Shedeur Sanders?
I will quit. Like, you guys will be finding a new host next week on this podcast.
Long term, you think, well, maybe that would totally sabotage everything that you've done so far with Richardson and with Daniel Jones. How do you find snaps for 3 players?
There's no way.
There's just, and gosh, I hope that doesn't happen.
I can't see it happening.
But, if you have 2 quarterbacks and you don't have a quarterback, but if you have 3, maybe
you have one in there. Yes, exactly. Well said, Matt.
And he's our starter. He needs, you know what he would need? Reps.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
And he would take them
reps
away.
And experience and a good offensive line and all the things that he didn't have in college, right? As far as the offensive line goes. I mean, that would just be
anyone who likes chaos.
That would
go
be
to bed tonight and pray for that, but
no,
I am not.
No, I don't like chaos.
I mean, a couple of the mocks that
not
I
that
saw
much
this week
chaos.
didn't even have Sanders going in the first round.
I don't believe that.
Which I don't believe either. No.
I think the betting is 2.5 over and under quarterbacks. I take the over because I can't believe
see that it doesn't happen. Yeah,
with the desperation that teams always show. One mock draft with a guy that I respect had 4 going with Shuck making at the bottom, and
they have Jackson Dart in there too.
Yeah,
right. So because desperation
makes
you do strange things.
And if you got a first round pick, you get that all important 5th year in fifth year player team option.
Yep.
So that is certainly valuable. Chris Ballard talking about more than the draft, like the quarterback competition a little bit. Also talked about linebacker being a need in the draft, and Jalen Carlisle having some offseason shoulder surgery, but should be good to go at some point during this offseason.
He talked about camp, but maybe sooner.
Yeah. So maybe a little bit in.
So he didn't sound overly concerned about that.
No, he didn't. He didn't sound concerned. So, but that's still a position like with EJ Speed out the door that I expect them to take somebody there in this draft.
They've got to address linebacker.
I would think,
and that's one position they draft.
Yes, exactly, well. And they've developed from that position fairly well in relatively recent years. But there was also with no. We'll get to that a little bit later. Shane Steichen also speaking to the Colts media this week as the team reports for its off-season program beginning. And for these first couple weeks, it's just it's not really on-field work. It is strength and conditioning. It's classroom stuff. It's getting people in the building, making sure guys who were injured last year are getting treatment and all that, whatever. So Shane Steichen saying there is no timetable for a quarterback decision, and he's looking for consistency. That's the one word that he kind of went back to over and over again, saying consistency. And as much as Chap in the past that we have stressed the ability and the desire for Shane Steichen to cite explosive plays as what he wants his offense to be known for, if you're just making 2 explosive plays a game, and other than that, you're going 3 and out, which has happened once or twice in recent years. That's not what he wants this offense to be.
Again, move the chains. He wants that mix that a lot of teams have, where you get those 3 or 4 explosive plays, not necessarily 60 or 70 yards, but 40 yards down the field, because it's hard to go 10 plays. But you cannot have your quarterback completing 50.6. Can't. 47.7 last year. You can't do it. The league average is probably 60%. Probably higher than that.
Yeah.
So it's third down conversions. It's going back to the old Chris Ballard comments of make the layups, hit the layups, and hit. You can have them both. You need both of them. So, and we talked to Anthony Richardson yesterday, and he said all the right things. Put in the work, working on footwork. If you've got a strong footwork and the strong base, I can handle the rest, because there's no question about his arm. There's not.
Right.
There's no question the physical things he brings to the team, the run threat and all that. But you cannot go 4 for 16 on third down. You just can't. No, they're not good enough. Few teams are good enough. And like Shane Steichen said, it'll be OTAs, it'll be training camp, it'll be preseason. We'll see how deep into preseason. It could be to the end of preseason.
Right.
And from everything, those of us that have talked to some guys in New York, they expect Jones to have a very, very efficient practice schedule.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why it's incumbent upon Richardson to come in. And like he said, what he's been working on to continue that. And I think we'll see when we're out there, we'll see if there is that improvement. He said he also needs to be more calm and not panic in the pocket. I guess trust your reads and trust your throws. All of this is fine and good. The words were great until we see it on the practice field. They're just words.
Doesn't matter all too much. This is what's expected. Like right. There's no benefit to saying the right thing right now, because if you don't, then it's terrible. But if
he comes out there yesterday and says, "Man, I don't know. I think I've done some pretty good work, but I don't know." No, everybody's encouraged.
That'd be great,
as they should be. And again, he was asked. Stephen Holder asked him, "Is this the biggest year of your career?" He said, "Every year's." Well, this is only year 3, so It's not like he's had, like you ask an 8-year-old, "This is the greatest thing I've ever had in my life." Well,
you're 8,
best birthday ever.
So again, I'm encouraged by what we heard. I'll be more encouraged by what we see.
Yeah, I was interested to see if he talked about his back injury, and he did. He was asked about that from the end of last year, because that was a significant, I think, twist to the end of the season, was him missing a couple games there with the back injury that was chronic, or whatever was the word that was described, or it had been something that had been brought up before in pre-draft meetings or evaluations or whatever.
He mentioned he'd had trouble, like when he would lift weights, it would kind of tighten up on him.
So he said about that they have a maintenance plan, and before he really didn't have a maintenance plan because it wasn't seen.
Then it's not chronic,
right?
If you had an issue with it,
like it's still weird to me, like the whole back issue problem. But at least he says it's not causing lingering pain. He says it's not causing lingering pain. So. hopefully that continues for sure. You don't want the injury to be anything that is taking his attention away from being a consistent thrower of the football.
Which was the case last offseason when he's rehabbing
the shoulder. Right. And so that's what you're trying to avoid, like completely focused on getting better mechanically, developmentally, and all that. So there's the Anthony Richardson latest angle as the offseason program begins. It is funny
begins. Too, on the notes here, he was asked what he can learn from Daniel Jones.
Yeah, okay.
It was kind of, well, he can help me navigate the good times and the bad times because he's. I don't know. It's a little. I get the impression that the relationship might be a little better than it was like with Joe Flacco.
Mm-hmm.
Joe was here to play football, and he kind of wrinkled his nose or his brow at being a mentor last year when we talked to him.
Right.
And that's these guys are competing for the same job. There can be friendly, competition, but at the end of the day, one of these guys is going to play. Well, Chris Ballard sort of said, if I'm a betting man,
both of them are going to play.
They're both going to help us. So, which is that's just based on
history,
on Richardson's history of missing 17 games with injuries. But it'll be interesting. It's not, and I wrote the other day, this is not even remotely ideal. Open competition is great. Not at quarterback.
No, it's really not.
It's like, it's like the old, if you have two quarterbacks, you have none.
Right.
So until they have one, they have none. And hopefully they have one in September.
We did speak with several other players as the Colts got back to work at team headquarters this week. Josh Downs spent the offseason trying to get healthy, says feels good, likes to run young receivers and all that. Yay, woohoo. Michael Pittman Jr., another receiver. GM Pitt would love to take Tyler Warren in the draft.
That tight end from Penn, the Penn State tight end.
Is what he says, the Penn State tight end. Let's see. He sees quarterback competition as just the nature of football, and his back issue is also in the past, and he's feeling a lot better, which good. Hopefully so. He was certainly hobbled last year.
He has not thrown with Richardson this offseason. Had a couple of sessions, he said, with Daniel Jones when Jones came to town, so that's encouraging. It'll be really. I'm optimistic with what we see, or eager to see what we see with Pittman, because what we saw last year was encouraging from the toughness standpoint, but he wasn't a shadow of himself.
Right,
and he's never been a real speedster anyway, and I thought he was really limited. We could almost have another podcast with this receiver room. I like the receiver room. I do. But, boy, they need a true number one.
I like the players that they have in it. The aggregate, I think, is something that just doesn't have the ultimate star power. And, like you said, and the best teams in the NFL have star power at somewhere in receiver, tight end, what have you. And that's period.
I think Pitt would be so much better if they had a one.
Yeah, somebody to just consistently take the top off.
Right.
The defense.
Right. So, and it's, I like the potential of it. I just wish, and again, I've never really hidden from it. I always wish Pitt had that one more gear, that one more level. I think he's a really good player. But I wish just from a roster building standpoint that he had a little bit extra to give that he just doesn't. This is who he is. Kind of like Miles Turner with the Pacers. This is who he is, and pretty doggone good player. But boy, you wish you had just a little bit more.
A couple defenders, a couple captains from last year, Zaire Franklin, Kenny Moore, also speaking with the media, talking a bit about learning a new system, getting used to, for Kenny, obviously some new teammates in the secondary. There'll be Kenny is, obviously when Stephon Gilmore came in, kind of had that same experience, but he's going to have to get used to playing with a couple other guys now who are. Kenny had been the highest paid player in the Colts secondary, I think, for a couple years now.
Oh, probably.
Yeah, and now he's one of several players who are paid highly and expected, therefore, to deliver highly.
Well, learn two new teammates, but also this is a defense, from what we've talked about with Anarumo, that is going to feature that nickel guy. This can be back to the old days with Eberflus and what they did and how they maximized that nickel with Kenny Moore. And Kenny was really, he had a Pro Bowl season in 1 year.
He did
with that
2021.
So I'm looking forward to seeing how they use Kenny, because he's like, well, he's not like he's Jack Doyle on defense, where he came here on waivers, right, from New England.
Yeah, from New England. Yep.
And has gotten a couple of contracts and has been a really good player. And now he's got some better help to kind of solidify the back end of the defense.
You are watching the Colts Blue Zone podcast on Fox 59 now. So the NFL draft kicks off in just a couple of hours as you're listening to this podcast. The Colts hold all 7 of their original picks right now.
4 now.
How about that? 4 now. Yes, exactly. As we tape this podcast.
As of this afternoon.
What FanDuel say the odds are on them having only their 7 picks?
0, probably. But that would be an interesting number. It should be like minus 2,500,
right?
Probably to do that, if not even higher, because that's what Chris does. He wants more darts. And honestly, as I was putting together like my All-RAS draft, like I understand that sentiment, like wanting some more darts, because, but of course I don't know these players as well as any of these scouts will. So
I always take the approach. I'd rather have 5 players that are really good or better, as opposed to 8 players and 3 of them might be, we'll see.
Right.
Yeah.
But that, the idea of the draft is, I don't know what your hit rate is, 60% maybe, if you're really good.
So you're always looking for that diamond in the rough, though, man. If you can,
I understand it,
but
for that Robert Mathis in the 5th round,
but
Zaire Franklin was
rare.
Zaire Franklin wasn't just a 7th round pick; he was the second linebacker they took in round 7. And I asked him what I said, "You remember your number?" And he said, was it 237 or he knows it. He's probably got a little tattoo on him somewhere.
Probably.
So these guys remember. They really do. And there are stories. This team's had stories of these late round picks, like you mentioned. Antoine Bethea, well, he was a 4 or 5.
I think he was 4th round, yeah.
So not quite the same. But I just would, at some point, I would rather have quality over quantity if it's one or the other.
What was I going to talk about? I wanted to talk a little bit about some things that Shane Steichen, not Shane Steichen, sorry, Chris Ballard said before I really dive headfirst into the All-RAS draft. And it was kind of about testing and numbers and RAS and all that.
I meant to drop that in there.
That Chris talked plenty about. Chap actually texted me a couple weeks ago with the guy who does the RAS, the relative athletic score, a post that he made on Twitter just showing how many players above a RAS of 8 on a scale of 1 through 10, obviously, if you know it, like that every team has taken over the past couple years. And the Colts have the most, as you would expect.
39, what was it?
It was 29 players over the last 4 drafts. So between 2001 and 2021 and 2024, the Colts have 29 players with a RAS score over 8. That is the most in the NFL. After them, the Packers have 26, the Commanders 22, Cardinals 21, Ravens 21, Rams 20, Chiefs 20. So they're not far and away better than anyone else, but you only go 6 teams down and you're already down to 20, which is 2/3 of the number the Colts have up at 29. Like it's a full 33% less than what the Colts had. It shows you how valuable the Colts believe that athleticism is, and drafting players that have the type of athletic potential to climb the ladder, so to speak, as you see the ladder behind me, if you're watching, like I said, on YouTube or Fox 59 now, to get to where they hope they're going to be in the future. So
is that a reflection of you just can't, it's cliche, but you just can't teach speed. You can't teach, the cutting ability. You can't teach acceleration.
I think so.
Yeah, I think it's an extension of the old speed kills.
Yeah, right. I think it's in part the front office thinks that their job is to bring in those players,
right?
And then it's the coach's job to develop those players. And obviously,
the most out of them.
You want players. You want to draft smart players, obviously, and that's not going to test with numbers that you get at the combine. That's more face-to-face stuff. And if you can put them through certain more paper tests and in other ways to see about that. But you want players that can understand what you're trying to teach them, obviously, but they need the potential to be taught and to develop those skills into those areas. So
one thing I did ask Chris Ballard is, I said, over the years, when you've missed on players, has there been a common denominator? And I think he sort of mentioned character. Sometimes you as much work as you do, you miss that. But then he mentioned the instincts. Sometimes a player doesn't have the instincts, whether it's reaction time, whether it's processing. And the one name that he talked about that exceeded everything because of his instincts was Shaq Leonard. I mean,
right.
It's not that he said, remember, he pointed out the forced fumble against the Texans at the goal line. He said, Flus didn't, dial up. Now, listen, when he gets to the 1 yard line, no, he said, that's instincts. And that's why Shaq's, for all of his tackle numbers, his numbers were takeaways. It was forced fumbles and sacks and interceptions. And maybe it's deviating a little bit from the defense and the scheme. But Kenny Moore has instincts. And if you don't have instincts and you're a half a step slow because you're thinking, then maybe you're not going to make it. And there have been a handful of players the Colts have had that just haven't gotten on the field. And they probably tested very well. They lack something.
Right.
So he mentioned the instincts is really high, and it's really kind of hard. Although you would think through 3 or 4 years in college, you would notice a player having instincts or not. But he made it very clear that instincts are so important, along with character.
Yeah. There's been instances, Ballard said, where we've gone with the exception, but we would just rather not have a team of exceptions.
God, I wish you'd have told us a few of those exceptions, just for context.
And the second you start taking the exceptions is when you end up with a bunch of players that are exceptions. And
not exceptional.
No, exactly. I would love exceptional. That'd be fantastic. But I think Kenny Moore is a great example that you just bring up. He, like, Chris Ballard needed to be wrestled to submission to take.
I think the scout said,
we need somebody.
There's nobody else.
Exactly.
He's got a pulse and he can play.
Right. And he's turned into so much better than Chris thought he would be. And that a lot of teams, obviously everyone thought he would be, because he was waived from the Patriots. And I know that that Bill Belichick has said in the past it was like a painful wave to get rid of him, but still that means he was at the bottom of the totem pole in what they had. So that's more the exception, and then other guys are the rule, and they want to make that the rule. And but that's in part, that's Chris Ballard's job, is to see when they should take the exception, and when they should stick to the rule. Obviously,
when should we roll the dice?
Right. But you're going to roll the dice on day 3, right? You're not going to roll the dice on a guy in the first 3 rounds.
You would think not.
You would think not. So
no.
Right. So that brings us to Dave's All-RAS draft.
Drum roll? Did you insert it? There you go.
There we go.
Some theme music.
Can we get the the NFL Films music in the background here? Yeah, that one. But anyway, Chris also said another thing about some of these numbers, and I have to start my All-RAS draft with a bit of a corollary here, and that is that if you don't have a RAS score, I can't take you in the All-RAS draft, which means
takes out a couple of notable players.
Exactly. No Tyler Warren, no Colston Loveland, and no Elijah Arroyo, who are probably 3 of the top 5 by anyone's numbers, tight ends on boards in this draft. So, and Chris actually talked a little bit about this, about evaluating players that don't go through that testing. He's saying, I'm not saying we're not going to take them, but there are going to be more questions. It raises more questions that we have to get answered between now and the draft. We ask a lot more questions on those players. I think sometimes they don't realize that. They think, okay, I'll let my tape do the talking, whatever. But the other stuff factors in, and we're going to include in this process. And they're going to get it with several other there are several ways to do it, like with telemetry and GPS stuff, computer vision, Zebra technology. Those are all things that he listed. I don't know exactly what all those things are.
Loveland was a shoulder. That's why he didn't test.
Yes.
And Arroyo was a knee, I believe.
Right. So there are reasons for some of these players obviously not testing, but that's still it's not
then you have questions about it.
Yeah. I still remember Caleb Williams last year when he was coming through, and the very first question you get, somebody yelled, "Caleb, are you afraid to compete?" at the combine.
It's a bad moment for journalism. It
Yes,
just was.
yes. Well, they let anyone in there. It seems like sometimes to the combine. So it's not exactly the ESPNs and the NFL networks of the world that are yelling, "Caleb, are you afraid to compete?" At the first
question.
Exactly.
Let's throw a softball up there.
Okay, dude, settle down. Anyway, Dave's All-RAS draft, and I didn't make any trades. I know I did a couple years ago. There was just too much to worry about trades and all that.
It is. I mean, it just becomes this
because
ongoing spiral effect.
I think in my scenario in the first round, trading down would have been a great option at 14, since I'm not taking Tyler Warren or Colston Loveland. And the man I ended up taking was Alabama linebacker Jihad Campbell, who is the linebacker in this draft with the second highest RAS score at 9.88 overall. Had 117 tackles last year for the Crimson Tide. I think that's the most of any Alabama linebacker since a young man by the name of D'Amico Ryans was playing there. So he's coming off of shoulder surgery though. And I read somewhere that he could be a candidate for PUP to start the season.
That's 4 games.
Exactly, which is just would be a disaster if that happens, I think, with your first round pick at a position that is
clearly of need for the Colts.
Of need,
right?
But boy, is it that important that you would take this guy in the first round? I'm taking him because it's a need, because he has a high RAS number. I was kind of debating back and forth between him and Nick Emanwari in this scenario, the safety out of South Carolina.
Last linebacker the Colts took in round 1.
I don't know.
Rob Morris.
Wow. Okay.
2000.
Yeah. Way back in the day, 25 years ago.
So go for it.
Yeah. It's been long enough. They're due.
But
They're due for linebacker.
Again, you fall back on how good they've drafted at inside and outside positions. You know, Shaq was a 2.
He was.
And Bobby Okereke and
3, I think,
Anthony Walker, they were inside.
Yeah. Walker might have been a 5,
right.
if I remember.
But quality players that you got 3 or 4 years of starting out of.
Yep. No doubt.
And you can't expect to get a Zaire Franklin in round 7. That's ludicrous to do that.
You don't plan on that.
You don't plan on it. Sometimes it does happen.
He was right there in round 7 when we thought he'd be there. Give me a break.
Right.
So I just historical context is they've not done that. Not only these guys, but the Colts.
Yeah. So Jihad Campbell, my first round pick for the Colts at 14.
He would fit in though.
I think he would. I think he seems like a really good playmaker. Like I think he could make an impact. I also think the Colts have done so much on defense throughout free agency that they need to help some offense. They need some weapons. You know, I've said this before. I'll say it again until I'm blue in the face. If you want to find out if your number 1 franchise pick quarterback from several years ago is actually your number 1 franchise pick quarterback, help him out a little bit, please. Like, get him somebody. Yep. And that comes in round 2 for me.
I would prefer a skill player as opposed to a lineman.
Yes. At 45 overall, we go to LSU tight end Mason Taylor, the 5th highest RAS score of any tight end in this class at 8.89. Taylor was a pretty darn good player for LSU. His dad is Jason Taylor, the all-pro, all-world, all-everything defensive end for Hall of Famer for the.
And his uncle is Zach Thomas.
Zach Thomas. How about that? So some pretty good bloodlines there for this young man. He is a little bit more known for his receiving than he is for his blocking, which we were talking about earlier, wanting a 3-down player. So
I can live with that.
Yes, I know. I know you can.
I can live with Dallas Clark.
I know you can.
I just can.
I know you can. And if that's what the Colts really want, then fantastic. Then great. But if they are really truly into a player who is proven to be a 3-down guy, like those don't come around often. That's like Tyler Warren in this class. Right. And then after that, everyone you're trying to develop that a little bit. You see, like, who has the body to do this? Who can be coached a little bit into being a better blocker? If it's like, if they have the size already and you just want them to show some better technique here and there, and you believe that they can be that type of guy.
You believe that they have the ability and the desire to do it to improve that portion of their game, then you can develop.
And if you're a guy like Mason Taylor, you're when your dad is Jason Taylor and your uncle is Zach Thomas, come on, you got to be a physical guy. You got to have that blood somewhere in your body to be that type of guy.
One thing again, Daniel Jeremiah has. I asked him about this tight end group, and he says there's 2 tiers. It's Warren and Loveland,
right?
And then you drop down. Now, I don't know how far you drop down. I'm thinking a 2nd-round grade,
right,
for Mason Taylor, who he says might be the safest pick at tight end.
That's high praise.
Where after however many years, 6-8 years, you say, "See, he was a pretty good player." Now, he's not in the difference-making level that the other 2 guys might have, but there's nothing wrong with safe picks. They need more than a safe pick, but if this guy comes in and gives you, 45 catches, we're not.
That'd be exceptional. I think
that'd be amazing.
It's awesome. Such a low bar.
Yeah,
but it needs to be 45 catches that make a difference. And again, I still say get the better player in round one. But I understand the rationale if this is what they would do.
Right. And I agree. I would say that they're probably targeting a better player in round one. I just couldn't, obviously, with my own RAS rules.
It would sort of
rules.
I stick to my rules.
It would negate your list if your number one pick doesn't have a RAS score.
I respect my RAS rules too much to sacrifice them.
As I text you, you're blinded by the RAS.
I am, very much so. Round 3, we go on. And at number 80 overall, the Colts select Virginia Tech running back Bashel Tutin, the number 6th ranked running back in terms of RAS score in this draft, with a 9.56 score there. If Chris Ballard goes 3 picks and doesn't take someone on the offensive or defensive line, I would be surprised. Let me just throw that out there. Like he loves him some interior or some trenches play. Maybe too much to get this exactly, but like I said, I want Anthony Richardson to have more weapons around him. And right now, with the wide receivers and drafting a tight end earlier, maybe in pass catchers, the opportunity isn't quite there. But in terms of pass catching running backs, Tutin could do that for Virginia Tech. And we talked about this guy during the lead up to the combine a little bit because he was a former track star in high school, a sprinter himself, kind of like Jonathan
Hines.
Taylor. What? And like Nyheim Hines as well.
Hines.
Exactly. And that's kind of the type of player that I was going for here. A guy that, like, there was another one, the DJ Giddens kid out of Kansas State that I considered. But as the more I read about him, there were several other questions about his blocking. It's like, no. We need someone who can block for the quarterback if he's back there too. So Tutin, I didn't see that as much anywhere, or really at all. In terms of when I was reading other scouting reports on him. So Tutin ran a lot of zone running schemes in college with the Hokies, a good pass protector. They called him a 3-down back. The question on him, as Matt explains here, as he was putting this together, is ball security. He had a couple fumbles, which also Nyheim Hines had with his punt returns as well. Was dropping a couple there his rookie year until he learned his lesson. But he has track speed, a 4.32 40-yard dash. You would love to see that type of explosiveness coming out of the backfield, because Jonathan Taylor just hasn't been a consistent guy catching the ball out of the backfield. He had his most catches as a Colt back in 2021, and since then has just not been used as much out of the backfield for whatever reason. So Bashel Tutin,
maybe they don't trust him.
Exactly, it's quite possible. Would be a guy that they could turn to in some of those situations, but also not sacrifice as much pass protection if you could get him kind of up to speed there in the plans. So Tutin, my guy there in the 3rd round. We go to the 4th round, and Chris Ballard always takes somebody in the secondary. Like, there's only been one draft in his entire time in Indianapolis that he has not taken a defensive back. That was in 2018. This time in the 4th round at 117 overall, they go to Ohio State cornerback Jordan Hancock, the number 2 corner in this draft for RAS score at 9.82. He's experienced. He's played for a while there for the Buckeyes. He's versatile, has good size. He's played some nickel, but he was a guy that also I think could play some special teams for them. He has good numbers. He has good speed. I'm not looking for him to play significantly at all. But like I said, Chris Ballard always takes a defensive back somewhere.
And good roster guy, it sounds like. I mean, from what I was reading in the evaluation.
Yep. So he's there. And again, I don't think Chris Ballard is going to go 4 rounds with not taking a defensive lineman or an offensive lineman. But this is just kind of how I've like I said, I respect my own RAS rules too much to sacrifice. Finally, in the 5th round, we get to someone who is in the trenches, Oklahoma State offensive tackle Daltton Cooper, who did come in here at a top 30 visit.
He was a top 30 visit.
He was one of the Colts' top 30 visits. The 15th ranked tackle in RAS this year with a RAS score of 9.06. This is at 151st overall. I was leaning personally, and Chap, you can maybe either disagree or give me an opposite take. I was thinking like outside more than inside, but if you're looking for someone to compete for that right guard position right away, then you could certainly consider someone in the 1st round at guard if you're a Chris Ballard. But like I think if you're going to play Gonzalez at right tackle, which I kind of am leaning toward right now, is what they're doing.
Braden Smith
but
back.
Long term, like I think he's more of an outside guy. So for this year specifically, you might need more help at the swing tackle position, and that's kind of why I lean toward Cooper as a guy who had more outside experience than inside experience.
That was sort of brought up with Shane Steichen talked about with at right guard. It sounds like that what they would prefer is to find a right guard and let Gonzalez be your swing tackle.
Right.
This year.
That'd be great.
Which is fine, but until then, Gonzalez is your right guard.
Right.
He has to be. I think they're disappointed to this point that Blake Freeland hasn't been taken more of a progressional leap. But yeah, I think that I'm kind of like you. I'm not RAS,
of course,
restricted. I think he takes an offensive lineman earlier just because it's in his DNA.
I agree.
And maybe a defensive lineman. You've got one a little bit later on.
And we also know that one thing, I mean, when we heard from Ballard a few weeks ago, he said this was an exceptionally strong draft when it came to the mid-rounds on offensive linemen. Mm-hmm. And you know that somewhere along the lines, if you're not bound by the rules of RAS, as we are here, there's going to be an offensive lineman taken earlier.
Into the 6th round at pick number 189 overall, the Colts select Nebraska defensive tackle Tai Robinson, who is the top-ranked defensive tackle in RAS score this year, a 9.89 score. Big dude, strong dude. Lent Zerline, the NFL.com writer, comped him to Grover Stewart, so I had to take him. Which Grover isn't going to blow anyone out with his RAS score, but Robinson, they stress his motor, good size and a frame. He has tendency, as Matt writes down here, to go in high with short arms, which you don't want. You want him to get low. You want him to try to get a little bit under the offensive tackles underneath.
Use your arms to get people off of you.
Exactly, but there's definitely going to be some help needed for the defensive line in this draft with some players like Dayo Odangbo moving on. You want to shore up a little bit, and I think they have some guys on the outside, with Ebukam and Quiddy and Taekwon. And they have a developmental guy they've had in the system the past couple years at the edge. Isaiah Land. And I think there was maybe even one other guy that I'm forgetting right now, but I think there was a little bit more room on the inside for someone to get some playing time this year.
Except keep in mind, you've only got one edge guy under contract
beyond
26.
Right. You're correct.
With Quiddy being a free agent after this season, and he's going to be such an interesting player to evaluate on what you do with him.
Yep.
And to the idea of not re-signing either Pay or Dayo is just that really it hurts. It hurts what you've done in the draft if you don't bring back either one.
That'd be a killer, I think, if they're both gone after next year. It's an indictment on that draft when you took them both in the first and second round that you wouldn't sign either of them to a significant second contract.
Is going to be such an interesting thing because he does so much good.
He's going to command a good salary. I mean, if Dayo got his from last year,
what did Dayo get? $18 million.
I think so.
It was over 3 years.
He could make buku bucks if he has a good season this year.
Give Quiddy 12 sacks this year and
look out.
Yeah,
look out.
Absolutely.
And, good for the Colts for this year that he does that, but then his price is going to go up.
Yep.
But again, we've always said that Quiddy is Jabal Sheard like, and that's not a knock. But when it comes time to re-upping him, that's why I say maybe they look for an edge guy because they signed Gallimore.
That's who I was forgetting. Gallimore. Yes.
Yeah. But he's inside. He's really more of a 3 guy. So we focus on the 2 or 3, tight end and weak side linebacker. They've got spots that they need to hit. Running. They will take a running back.
Yeah, I think so
too.
They
will.
Yeah.
I don't know if they take it on first or second day.
Right.
This is a deep draft for running backs. So they're not done. The roster's not. God, they've got almost 30. They got 25 positions to fill.
Yep.
On their roster, so there's a lot of guys not here yet.
And one guy could be a quarterback as well if they decide to fill that position from why is my mind going blank? Texas quarterback.
Oh, Ewers.
No, the guy who was here.
Sam
Ellinger. Thank you.
Out of sight, out of mind.
I know, for real.
I'm the one whose memory's gone, not you.
Terrible. Round 7, 232nd overall, the Colts select Montana State quarterback Tommy Mellet, the Butte, Montana native, who led the Bobcats to the FCS championship game last season, has a 9.28 RAS score. His numbers are ludicrous. He ran a sub 4.4 40-yard dash. This kid, like he is lightning in a bottle, but he's also like 5'11". So he's almost Drew Brees. Exactly. So he's Drew Brees, except he runs as fast as Anthony Richardson.
And he doesn't have the Drew Brees cannon.
Exactly. Or the accuracy, neither of those things. Like, I love Tommy Mellet. I started my broadcasting career in Bozeman, Montana, covering Montana State football. So I fully admit this is half a pick of the heart over the head, but
it's all right. Hey, it still fits the RAS.
Exactly. He fits my RAS score. So I slid him in there. He's the number 6 quarterback.
Can you reach for a player in the 7th round?
I don't think you can. That's the thing. Like, you just want to secure that this guy's on your team and not have to bid with anyone else. But like, he could be a guy, honestly, if he gets a chance in the NFL, who's more in the Julian Edelman mold, who could convert into a wide receiver.
That's what I read in a lot of the draft evaluations.
Right. But he's super smart kid, team captain type stuff, like culture setter guy. And in round 7, what the heck? Let's see what we can do with Tommy Mellet at quarterback. And I wouldn't be surprised if the Colts do take a quarterback in this draft to try to develop.
I was just going to say, forgetting your RAS, won't they take a quarterback?
I think they do. Like I said,
I'm torn because if you draft a guy who's developmental, it's back to where's his reps coming from?
Right.
As a third guy, he won't get much. So how much are you going to develop? And if that's the case, I would rather try to develop a guy at linebacker because he can play special teams, at corner because he can play special teams. But that's the curiosity of the draft.
Kind of like I was talking about earlier. Again, like I would have loved to get some more darts in here, just to get some more players. And guys like a Missouri quarterback, Brady Cook, also had a really high RAS score. That I was interested in maybe taking him in the I was interested in taking him. I talk as a GM of a team. Georgia had a defensive tackle, Tyrion Ingram Dawkins, who I thought was interesting. A guy, Bryce Cabendule, the offensive lineman from Kansas, who was also here on a top 30 visit. Like, he was more the inside guy that I was considering taking, but I decided to go with Daltton Cooper, again, the guy out of Oklahoma State. If Chris Ballard gets another Wisconsin guy in here, look out for strong safety Hunter Wohler. Just another secondary guy. If they can squeeze him in there anywhere, I wouldn't be surprised.
Need a safety.
Yes, exactly. Like, you might want a safety in there. And how confident are you that Daniel Scott is actually going to play this year? You shouldn't be.
It's been an Achilles and a quad.
Yeah, exactly. So all those players I would love to see. Also, Beech Grove's own Josh Fryer, like, wasn't even listed in the Pro Football Network. Yeah, Pro Football Network like draft. Like, I was like, what are you doing? Terrible, awful. So wanted to get him in a shout out in there too. So really looking forward to see what the Colts do over the next couple days, and it should be interesting. It should be fun, and we look forward to seeing what exactly comes to Indianapolis.
We'll have facts next week instead of speculation.
Yes. Don't we love that? Good facts.
We'll be better.
All right. You can download, subscribe, get us delivered to your podcast listening device as soon as we drop. We certainly appreciate you watching on YouTube or on Fox 59 now. Follow us on Twitter. Mike Chappell is at mchappell51. Matt Adams is at Statamatty. I'm Dave Griffiths at DaveG_sports. We'll see you next week on the Colts Blue Zone podcast.